Welcome to the Everything Financial Radio Show on the Legacy Radio Network. I'm your host, Dennis Tubbergen. Glad you're with me today. We have a great show lined up for you. A couple of special guests that we're going to have on today's show. First, Mr. Karl Denninger will join us momentarily. Karl has been on the show before. Karl has a unique talent to be able to take what's going on in the economy and explain it in very, very, I'll just say blunt terms. Karl's a very candid guy, and love to have him on the show and get his perspective. Also, a new feature this week. We're going to call it a big government segment. We're gonna take a look at what's going on in the state of Michigan. Is the DNR about to put some small farmers out of business due to an order? We're going to talk with a representative from that group as well. We'll also be talking about a report this week that came out. Social Security Trust Fund is projected now, according to the most recent trustees report, to run dry 3 years sooner than was expected. And if you're collecting Social Security disability or know someone that is, the trustees report is especially alarming. There are 11 million Americans on Social Security disability programs. However, the trust fund will run dry in 2016. That's not too far down the road, folks. So what are the Social Security program trustees suggesting happen? Also, Medicare. There was a report published this week also about another entitlement program that was published on CNS News. Medicare could cost each U.S. household over $328,000, and the International Monetary Fund is warning of a coming European credit crunch. Just a month ago, they were saying that it would not happen. Now they're saying it is, confirming my long-held view that I never believe anything until it's been officially denied. If you want to know about what's going on in the economy from our perspective firsthand, I'd invite you to attend one of our discovery groups. At the discovery groups, we talk about the current economic winter season. We're going to, in fact, have Mr. Ian Gordon back on the Everything Financial Radio Show next week to talk about that. And we talk about what you might want to do to protect yourself. We will be at Sunnybrook Country Club in Granville on Thursday, May the 3rd, and then 1 week later, Centennial Country Club on May the 10th, both in Grand Rapids. You can go to personallegacyseminars.com. That is personallegacyseminars.com to get more information about the discovery groups. We also talk about some of the opportunities to save on taxes and other financial expenses due to some recent law changes. So that information is covered at a discovery group as well. If you have not attended a discovery group in the last 3 or 4 months, you are welcome to attend. If you have attended, these have been at capacity. We'd appreciate it if you'd let someone else attend. So again, personallegacyseminars.com to get information about the discovery groups. I am pleased to have back with me today on the Everything Financial Radio Show Mr. Karl Denninger. Karl is a prolific blogger, economic commentator, appears on many economic and business television programs, and has been a guest on the Everything Financial Radio Show. I think, Karl, this is the 4th time we've had you here, so thanks for joining us again.
No, thank you for having me back.
Karl, the International Monetary Fund Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, about a month ago said that the Euro breakup would not happen, but just last week an article in the Telegraph had her changing her tune a bit. She was quoted as saying that it was possible. So my question to you is she finally just acknowledging the inevitable?
I think so. The basic problem you have within Europe is that socialism works fine until you run out of other people's money to steal. Then there's a problem. And so what Europe has found is that the general structure of the European economy is one of large amounts of transfer from people who produce to people who don't. And that transfer happens at a higher velocity and in larger volume in the periphery. And to some extent, even in places that aren't considered in the periphery, such as Spain and Portugal. The larger issue at hand is that ultimately Germany has been paying for essentially all of this, and they will stop. And when they do stop, then you're going to run into the issue that how do we finance these continuing deficit spending habits that we have within the European zone? And the answer is you can't. So, Greece was the canary in the coal mine, if you will. But remember that Greece was a tiny little economy from a standpoint of the actual damage that was done by their, it was default. They call it a reorganization, but it was a default. When you see Spain, though, or Italy or Ireland threaten to blow up, that's an entirely different matter, because the banking system has taken these higher yielding debts and has rolled them onto their own balance sheets in an attempt to grab the operating money to cover their operating expenses. And this is ruinously bad when you're the one that gets stuck with a capital loss, which is ultimately what's going to happen.
Carl, you commented that Germany has essentially been financing the bailouts, if you will, and the German central bank president, his name escapes me, recently stated, I believe it was just this past week, that it was not the job of the European Central Bank to tackle Spain's problems. Very public statement. Is this going to change the policy of the European Central Bank?
I don't know. The big issue you have there is that this is a decision that you would think would be mostly driven by Germany, because they are, of course, the exporting nation and the one that has a current account capability to carry some of this. But effectively what's happened over the years is that Germany has, for example, exported Porsches and Audis and things like this to other countries, but the people that are buying them are not able to actually cover the cost. And so they're financing the difference between what can actually be paid for and what they collect through this back door. This is an extremely destructive process over time, because it's hidden, and yet now all of a sudden, it's kind of like spending more money than you take in on your credit card. It works right up until the point that you run into your limit. And exactly how this works out within the ECB is still, I believe, an unknown question. Certainly the Germans are getting very tired of the idea that they're supposed to be financing this stuff, now and ever more.
Well, the Finnish people have certainly expressed similar sentiments, as have the Dutch. So what is the most likely scenario for a potential Eurozone breakup? Does Greece leave? Does Germany? Does Finland? Do the Dutch say, enough is enough, you're on your own, we can't bail out weak sister economies? In your best estimation, how does this play out?
I would expect that the Greeks, if they have any kind of sense, would not leave. Remember that the ECB and the Eurozone in general has no means available to force a country to abandon the common currency. So the departures have to be voluntary, and what this says is that ultimately, if Germany gets sufficiently aggrieved, what Germany does is leave and go back to the Deutschmark. And that leaves the rest of the consuming nations with two alternatives. One is to devalue the currency through continual emission, essentially printing, and that ultimately fails as well, because you're just adding a larger divisor to the value of the currency. The second is to say, okay, the idea that we can continue to spend more at a government level in transfer payments than we take in taxes can't possibly work, and therefore we're going to stop voluntarily before we get hit over the head and our economy and our currency collapses. Those are really the only two outcomes that are possible. But my expectation is that the pushback is going to come from those countries that are reasonably sound, and ultimately Germany will be the one that departs.
So, give us your estimation as to a potential timeline. Is that 2012? Is it a couple years down the road? How do you see this playing out?
I've been disappointed in a sense in that I didn't think we'd get this far down the path as we have. Certainly from the 2008-2009 time frame until now, I didn't believe that the governments and central banks and everybody else involved would get away with it for as long as they have managed to do so. Part of the difficulty in forecasting a timeline here is that we're choosing between whether or not you'd like something really awful to happen or something catastrophically awful to happen, and the longer you wait, the worse the damage is. So we are kind of debating right now between, does this occur in the next year or thereabouts, or do we get past an overcenter point where the outcome is potentially war, because that has traditionally been the way these kinds of problems are resolved. And one would hope cooler heads would prevail and force the reconciliation of these accounts to take place. I think the most likely outcome is that we don't get through 2012, simply because everything always appears to be going just fine right up until the tornado comes out of the middle of nowhere and smashes the church. That's the history that we had in 2008, and we're seeing the same kind of rumblings internally in the economy, along with commodity prices, which was part of the trigger last time. So I suspect that that's the case. But if we do get through 2012, over the next 3 to 5 years, mathematically, I don't see how we can get beyond that point, both in Europe and here in the United States.
Karl, we've got about a minute left in this segment, and you mentioned commodities, and that was one of the triggers last time. Can you briefly explain to our listeners what you mean by that?
Yeah, the biggest issue that we have right now is, of course, oil prices. Gasoline hovering in the $4 area is an extreme drag on the U.S. economy. It's not just the amount of money that comes out of everybody's pocket. You know, when you go to the gas station and you put $100 in your SUV, fill it up, that's a huge problem. But it's also the psychological impact, because you have to put gas in your car to go to work every day. And we have built an economy that is dependent upon reasonably stable fuel costs. It's not so much the price as it is the swing. And so the psychological impact of this is quite severe, and then you have all of the cost push-through that comes from, for example, from the trucking industry that gets pushed into the retail chain.
We are chatting with Mr. Karl Denninger. We'll continue our conversation with him when Everything Financial Radio on the Legacy Radio Network continues. After these words, stay with us.